We're talking fall. We're talking cozy. We're talking
The Owen sisters are
So
back.
excited.
a Practical Magic sequel has been confirmed. So let's revisit that house that we all fell in love with. And I'm going to take it one step further and show you how you can recreate that dreamy Practical Magic aesthetic in your own space.
But we want to have fun.
Hi, my name is Anne. I am an interior architect and designer, and what I think is so incredible about the set design for Practical Magic is that everyone thinks it's a real house. The design was done by Roman and Williams. They're a really famous duo, so they created this house from nothing, kind of based off of Victorian influences, lighthouse influences, and kind of scroll work that you might see in that spell book. So everyone talks about the greenhouse is particularly beautiful. The kitchen is so cozy. This architecture firm actually recreated the look for a client of theirs. I also love the pantry where they're kind of cooking up spells. But today I want to talk specifically about the parlor.
Get the bird.
Get the book.
So the funny thing about the parlor is you actually barely see the space in the movie except for that final climactic scene where they actually remove everything except for tons of candles. But it was so beautifully done that I think it's the perfect inspiration for your own parlor, or what you probably call a living room. So Roman and Williams found most of the pieces through architectural salvage. You can tell that from these images here. They're time worn, they have a story, they come from some different eras, but there's a pretty much a refinement to it in terms of the palette is kind of like muted brown, some blacks, some creams, with a little bit of kind of orange and green thrown in. And now I'm going to show you how I would design a Practical Magic inspired living room or parlor. I'm going to stay pretty purist for this one because I think the original is so beautiful. Even though the exterior is Victorian, the interior is actually a bit more arts and crafts, and you can see that with the detailing here in the wainscoting. They have a really dark, probably ebony stain on theirs, which I'm going to link that you could do, or if it's better to paint, maybe you have wood that's already painted. This Sherwin-Williams Black Magic is perfect. Honestly, I was just looking for a warm black and this one came up, and so the name was pretty fitting. And then, like I was saying with the arts and crafts style, they have this tile around the fireplace. So this is a green one. It comes in a few different patterns that then lay out together, very similar to what they had in the space in terms of the tone and the patterning. I did also see one from Etsy that I thought was kind of fun if you're trying to maybe, spice up the color palette a bit with a more yellowy green. So I'm going to link that one as well. After that, I found a wall covering that's very similar to the one that they had. It's kind of birds and branches. It's more colorful than it sometimes reads in images when you actually watch the movie. So this one from Spoonflower really captures that, and it comes in, regular pasted or peel and stick, which is great for some flexibility. Then we start adding the soft finishes. So they had a very traditional looking rug. This is one from Soho Home that I think the palette fits really nicely. And after that, we get the curtains, which are very important. So they had velvet, kind of like rusty orange, slightly brown ones that I'm showing here. These are from Anthropologie, and the shears are as well, although their shears may have had kind of like twigs or branches. I really liked this pattern from Anthropologie. It's described as enchanting. So again, I kind of couldn't help picking something out because of the description. After that, this velvet sofa. This one's from Soho Home. It has kind of the rolled arms and more traditional like turned legs to it in a chocolate brown. They had a pretty traditional looking like oval black wood coffee table. I thought this one from Lulu and Georgia was a little bit fun, kind of contemporary take on that traditional look, again with the oval shape. They had two armchairs. I could not help picking out this one on the left because it was called the Owen armchair. Very similar shape with the rolled arms, slip cover, velvet brown. And then they had on the right, their armchair had kind of like those suspended arms. So I thought this one was kind of capturing that silhouette with the mix of materials. And I think that they're playing nicely off each other where one is kind of heavier feeling and one is lighter feeling. Side tables everywhere. They have so many. I couldn't even count them all. There might be 8 minimum in the room. And they come in a variety of styles. They have a bunch that have the turned legs that you can see that I have with this nesting table here. They have some that kind of have that bamboo look to them more with kind of like the knuckles. I included a burl wood one because I think it's cool to kind of play with some different woods in this space, especially if you keep them all generally the same tone. I think you can do that pretty effectively. And I did add a metal one, just kind of play with materials a bit more. They had this one kind of smaller chandelier to the side. I think since it was a movie set, they didn't have more lighting than that. So I chose something in a similar kind of composition, but bigger and like centrally located in the room. And I thought this one was kind of cool with the mix of materials. Like there's a rope material, the linen shade, and then the brass. It's kind of an updated take on what they had. They had two wood kind of cabinet pieces. One is that display piece, which you see most frequently from the entryway. And then they also had a wood kind of like sideboard that held a bunch of things. So this is where I ended up. I did try, I found this cabinet that had the kind of like pointed arch, like Gothic look to it. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh my God, yeah, of course. This looks totally good. And then when I saw it in this space, I was like,
what are you doing?
and I realized what Roman and Williams did really effectively is they didn't just play into the stereotypical like Victorian Gothic. They actually chose some pieces like this cabinet that are pretty simple in their like silhouette and materials. And I think that's what keeps the room from feeling overwhelming and just feels more like accessible. So I ended up going back to this simpler one. After that, that leather armchair, which Julie ends up in, mid exorcism. I found one that's pretty similar in terms of like the nail head trim and the tufting in the back. Theirs, of course, looks like very time worn and cozy. And then they had a side table with this similar kind of like 3-leg bottom, pretty traditional looking. After that, they did have a spindle chair by the sofa. So I found this one, it's either Amber Interiors or Lulu in Georgia. I will link it. And I did add like an upholstered seat. I kind of played with the green because I think we could have a bit more fun having some subtle color in the room. And then another side table with that similar kind of like feet on the base. So I think with the wall decor is where you see Roman and Williams really did some smart editing. So they have the pressed leaves, which is, it's something that was alive and it's dimensional and they're all different. So putting them in the same style frame, putting them in a 3x3 configuration just makes it feel more like refined rather than having like a bunch of different frame types really cluttered. Again, they didn't go too far into that kind of like Victorian cottagey cluttered vibe, which I think is what makes it so successful. They had a kind of shield looking mirror in the back that I think they just hung upside down. So I found this one that I liked the shape of. They had a bunch of portraits, this really pretty portrait. And what is cool about it is that it's an Etsy seller that you can do a digital download. So I've done this before where you do a digital download and then you can send it to a place like FrameBridge and get it framed and kind of spend money to get a nice frame. So this is an Augusta frame from FrameBridge. I thought this one was really pretty and I thought the coloration played into what we were doing here. Then we start adding all the ambient lighting. Again, like the side tables, there's so many and a lot are in pretty similar like silhouettes. A lot have the kind of like turned legs. That tall one that you can see from the door, I did replace the shade on it to get that kind of, they call it like a V-notch shape to it. And then otherwise there are a bunch on the tables. There's that one that has kind of the gourd shape on the bottom, but then they have a pointed shade on top. So again, this is one where I chose the lamp and then a separate lamp shade to get that kind of juxtaposition that's interesting. They did also have kind of traditional candelabras by the fireplace. I think they were maybe 5 lights on each of them. So I toned it down a bit with this one, but I think the detailing is really pretty over the fireplace. And then I couldn't help this middle one. It's from Green Row with a pretty patterned shade and kind of like flower details to the stem. And then a ton of throw blankets. I honestly think this one on the sofa looks like a rug. They probably just put a rug over the back and figured no one would notice for that patterning. So I found some pretty cool ones from different suppliers, including, just a basic colored one, kind of like a rust color, one that has the more traditional kind of like rug-like patterning, and then one that kind of has that like birds and leaves patterning to tie into the wallpaper. Then we add pillows, of course, velvet with some different patterning. I tried to mix it up rather than not just solid to have one is actually made from a rug, so it's a vintage piece, and then one has some like striping, some kind of more floral paisley patterning to it. But overall, you see there's a really like fall-like color palette that makes it feel so cozy. And then, of course, they have candles everywhere. So they have candle holders everywhere, including on the tabletops, on the floor, on the fireplace mantle, on the coffee table. So I found a bunch here that I think are really cool. I've never done floor candle holders, so I think it's pretty cool if your family life allows for that. What makes it cool is to do a bunch of different materials and shapes. So some are more kind of curved sculptural, some are more regimented. One almost looks like a sunburst on the bottom, and then a mix of materials too. So some are kind of brighter silver, some are darker like black bronze, and we have one that even looks like a bamboo material. There also are individual holders as well as kind of like clusters of holders. So you can really create, different effects depending on how you arrange them. And then finally, we add in some accessories to get that kind of collected witchy vibe. Vintage books stacked up everywhere, some different kind of like vessels and jugs and like ceramics and metals. And then you also have dried flowers, which I think is so pretty. My grandmother used to do dried flowers. It's just such a pretty kind of like muted color palette, and they last forever. So here you can see how we started with a very basic bare room and added in some design magic with a smart curation of items to create something so cozy and inviting and just begging you to read a book inside.
Dearest Jilly.
So let me just wrap up by showing you some detailed product pages. And like I said, you can find all the links below. It's funny because I think a lot of us were disappointed to find out that this house didn't really exist, but I actually think in an interior design sense, it's really inspirational in that you can take whatever you're working with and be really thoughtful with the finishes, with the items that you collect to create whatever energy it is that you're going for. So Practical Magic is based off the book by Alice Hoffman. When I checked my Kindle, I have read at least 15 books of hers, so I am a fan. And a lot of her stories involve sisters, like Practical Magic. So I just wanted to say I love you to my big sister, Kate. And to all of you still watching, thank you so much. Please consider subscribing to support my channel, and I will see you next time. Bye.